What's up, guys? Chris here from Mainly Mesh. Welcome to What Shaft Should I Buy? Part 1. I want to really address the recent videos that we've been doing with the Break It series and why I'm even doing them in the first place, because they are obviously so flawed from a scientific method point of view. I didn't control any variables. I had 6 different people try to destroy 6 different shafts. I used a situation that is completely not possible on the field of lacrosse, where I have a solid immovable bar attached to concrete that I'm smashing with an over heavy head. I used 3 different heads in the first video and a different head for the next 3. There's a lot of stuff that's wrong with that test, so why the heck would I even do it in the first place? If I'm trying to pretend like I'm a big scientific guy, why would I just throw all caution to the wind and do something like that? One, obviously, is for your entertainment. It's kind of fun seeing, how these shafts would hypothetically break in an absurd situation. It's fun to do. The second is to generate the type of conversation that we've been having in these comment sections that have been blowing up, and we've seen String King hop in, East Coast guys hop in, and seeing people defend their product in a way that I think is really good for the market. But I want to kind of clarify some of the more egregious mistakes that you guys saw in the recent videos. The first being addressing very directly what type of strength we are talking about with these shafts. So it's very important to understand when you see the most breaks in lacrosse and where on the shaft you see a lot of these breaks. In my personal experience, when I would break shafts, 99% of the time it would be either when I got a direct shot to the middle of my shaft that I was trying to, get in and jam the player as he got a shot off, and I received, a high-speed ball right to the middle of the shaft. Or when I was, and more likely, cross-checking an opponent as I was defending them, typically in a midfield position, very rarely on a ride. I think I've only ever broken 1 shaft on a ride, because typically when I'm playing attack, I'm throwing more lift checks into the defenders that aren't as experienced carrying the ball and don't hold their stick as close to their body. So we're usually talking about splits in the middle of the shaft. Now, specifically addressing the Gen 6 that we broke yesterday, part of the torque box technology allows them to have increased strength in the middle of the shaft and decreased strength and more flex at the top of the shaft. Where did we break that head? At the very top of the shaft. I'll grab it for you real quick. This break was nearly at the throat of the shaft, right beneath the throat of the head. So that's the weakest point on an epic shaft, and all of the strength in the shaft through the torque box is centered, right in the middle of this dragonfly logo. So I was hacking at the softest part of the shaft to begin with. But also, more importantly, if you didn't watch the end of my video yesterday, you have to understand a concept called delamination with carbon fiber shafts. And what delamination is it's the layers that are held together, the layers of pre-impregnated carbon fiber the layers of pre-impregnated carbon fiber that are held together by a resinous substance, a resin, and as you strike it multiple times in the same exact location, some of that resin can come loose and allow the outer sheath of the shaft to flex more extremely than the inner ones, and can compromise the integrity of the shaft much sooner than if you were simulating a bunch of hits dispersed evenly across the shaft. So between those two things, I basically put this shaft in as bad of a position to break as possible, not to mention the fact that I had a defensive heavy head on a short stick, and a lot of what will break the shafts in this, and why I had heads on the shafts as I was trying to break these for entertainment's sake, mind you, was that as you're hitting a rigid surface, the head and all of its weight is flexing this point right underneath the shaft, right underneath the head, even more, and causing even more stress. And that's something that you're going to see much more on a carbon fiber shaft if you're slamming it against a metal pole than if you were doing that to a metal shaft. So with the C12, that was definitely a pretty strong shaft. When I broke that one, I had a goalie head on it, and I did a very light hit against a pole, and I snapped it clean in half, one hit. So, and that only speaks a certain amount to the way the C12 was constructed, but speaks a lot more to the fact that I was putting an extreme amount of stress in a way that carbon fiber shafts aren't really set up to do. You're rarely going to have a situation where you're hitting a stationary shaft on a field as hard as you possibly can. So I wanted to address that. The second thing I want to address in terms of how to buy your shaft is knowing what position and what level you play at. You will never see a box player in Canada using an Epic Dragonfly shaft because of all the cross-checking they're doing. What that's doing is it's causing repeated impacts in the same part of the shaft, causing that lamination. So if you're a defensive midfielder, I would never ever recommend to you a carbon fiber shaft, because you're hitting the shaft in the same exact spot as you're cross-checking these midfielders coming down the field, and you're causing excessive delamination that the carbon fiber shaft isn't designed to be able to handle. It would take excess amounts of resin or extreme layers of carbon fiber prepreg in order to handle that. And so if you notice that Epic has a C32 box shaft, and that's actually the shaft I use on my gamer, is I cut 2 inches off of it. It's a much thicker sidewall, has many more layers of prepreg, many more layers of resin in between, and that's one of the sturdiest shafts I've ever used, because it accounts for the amount of delamination that you would be finding in an excessively cross-checking position. So if you're a defensive midfielder, you should absolutely buy a meaty metal shaft or a box carbon fiber shaft. Part of the reason why the Jewel Lev has seemed more durable and is more durable. First of all, it's an 8.5 ounce shaft. These are all 6 ounce shafts. But it has much thinner layers of prepreg, which can really decrease the amount of delamination you see in a shaft. If you're working with 130 layers of microscopic layers of prepreg, you're not going to have the same flex profile that you will on one of these, but you will see a much larger increase in durability. Secondly, you have to understand that as an attackman, you're going to see a much smaller percentage of your shafts breaking, especially if you're doing the proper lift checks on rides. And at that point, you're not going to be getting enough performance out of a metal shaft that you would with a carbon fiber shaft. So for an offensive-minded player who isn't going to be doing too many cross checks or throwing too many slap checks hard on a ground ball situation, you should absolutely buy a carbon fiber shaft, because you're going to get more responsivity, more flex, a little more velocity in your game-like situations than you would with a metal shaft. And then finally, the only reason why we're really carrying the metal shaft to begin with is because it can generate extra speed, and so in a sense, it's almost a novelty item to us. I would never recommend a metal stick for somebody who's looking to go and play college lacrosse, because you're going to go snap that thing. But if you're a college lacrosse player trying to set your own shot speed record, you're going to need a metal shaft to shave off that extra 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces potentially in order to hit your shot speed record. So it's something important to keep in mind. And obviously I have my preferences towards certain things. I think the potential for carbon fiber in the future is much greater than it is for metal, and String King will be the first ones to say that too. Carbon fiber is definitely the material of the future, but the reason why they came out with the metal shaft is because a lot of these companies were claiming that they could make you shoot a lot faster when we weren't quite seeing that statistically. So they just made a shaft that was 1.5 ounces lighter, and that's how you shoot faster. That's just a simple force equals mass times acceleration equation, and you're going to generate a faster shot if your stick is 20-30% lighter. So thanks so much for watching this first part. I'll take you a little bit more visibly through the shafts that we have for sale and walk you through what you should be looking at when you're deciding to buy a shaft from us in a upcoming video. So that'll either come out today or tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching this one though, and I'll catch you guys next time. Connor, where'd you go?